All right. I think this is working. First time I've ever done a live stream before, so hopefully this is all set up properly. I've streamed before, so well, don't want to be hearing my voice back twice. So I've been getting a bunch of questions from different people, different emails, and they've been, some really great questions about how to start an EV charging business. So I thought I would just set up a live stream, and I wrote down a bunch of the questions and we can just go through. And if you have any questions that come up, that you've been wanting to ask or you've been wondering, feel free to add them to the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Let's see here. I'm still kind of double checking everything's set up properly. Hopefully my mic's working. Okay, so I'll just go through and give an overview on, I don't know, just going off the top of my head. So for me, I'll give you a bit of a backstory. I've been in sales for a long time, and I worked in a few different industries. I've always loved sales, but in terms of what I was selling, it took me a while to find something that I actually found meaningful. And there was a couple things that I enjoyed. I always enjoyed the sales side of it, but what I was selling, just my heart wasn't in it. So I was trying to figure out what mattered to me and what I found meaningful. And I came across the energy industry, and EV charging kept popping up. And at first, I wasn't too sure about how this whole thing worked. And it's just like anything, you find a little bit of interest, and you learn one thing, you learn the next thing, and it grows from there, right? And I'm so excited about this industry. I think we're still at the early stages. This is still the beginning. And every time I do research, every time I learn more, it just feels like sometimes it feels like baby steps, sometimes it feels like big leaps. But I have no doubt that with time, this thing is just gonna blow up, and there's gonna be so much room for entrepreneurs and opportunity for different business owners to really take a piece here. So I think, as I said, we're still in the early days, but I think there's lots of room for growth. Okay, so let's find this little list I have here. Just checking my settings here. Okay, my mic's on. I think I'm recording this. It's live. No one's here yet, but I hope you guys can watch this later, because I'm going to start. Just bear with me. I'm just going to get everything set up here. Okay, let me pull up my list. Okay. Okay, we're set up. I'll chop that part out when I release this video. So just going off the top of my head, just laying some more of the foundation here. What does it mean to start an EV charging business? I think that's the biggest question, because the tricky part with this industry or this business is there's so many different ways to approach this thing, and it depends who you are and what you perceive as starting an EV charging business. Like, let's say you already own a business, you own a storefront where people can come and visit. That's actually not as common now, especially with everything being online. But let's say you are one of the rare few that does have a physical property. Then for you, starting an EV charging business might mean installing your own little EV charging station at your existing location, and that's its own little separate business that's making money. Or starting an EV charging business might mean to you, if you, let's say, wanted to manufacture the products that the EV chargers use, like the hardware, or maybe even its components of the software. It could be, on the software side. But I think for most people, most entrepreneurs, people that I know, when they're thinking about starting an EV charging business, they're thinking about owning the EV chargers themselves and selling it to people who install them, and making a profit from the resale, and making a profit from ideally the electricity. So that's always what I just want to emphasize when I'm talking about starting an EV charging business. There's lots of different ways to make money, but through my experience, the best way is through reselling the electricity. So the electricity that's going into whoever is using the EV charger, you're marking up that electricity and making a profit from reselling it. So to back up a little bit, to explain the concept. So let's say you started your own EV charging business. You've done the legwork, which I'll get into in a moment, with setting up the chargers and the software and everything. How does the scenario look from a bird's eye view? So you find someone that has a physical location. They're the one that's paying for the electricity. So their name is on the electricity bill. They're your customer or your client, right? And you speak to them and you say, hey, look, this would be a really great spot to install an EV charger. Let's go with level 2 EV charger right now, because that's usually the best place to start. I know a lot of people have their eyes on those big DC fast chargers, which are great. They're definitely way more profitable. But in the early days, even if you are planning on setting up a DC fast charging location, I'd still recommend starting with level 2, even if it's just one location. Because with level 2, it's almost like it's like the gateway drug. It's like the entry point to get into the EV charging world, because a lot of the systems and the functionality of everything is the same for DC fast charging and for level 2. It's just with DC fast charging, it's on a way bigger scale. And because it's a bigger scale, you have a bigger investment and more to lose potentially, or more to gain. It's, but if we want to play the game, it's better to do a little test run before we just dive in full blast. So with setting up an EV charging business, there's a lot of things that you have to learn on the go through trial and error. You can research it, you can learn about how the software works and how the payments are processed and everything. But I mean, I'm a big fan of trial and error and just diving in and figuring it out as you go. And if you're going to dive in, do it with less on the line with level 2. So what I would recommend doing first is finding a location that you can install a level 2 EV charger. Any location, could even be your own house. If it's able to provide the power that we need, which is that 208 volt or 240 volt, that's all we need. It can be your friend's garage. It can be, let's say, someone that is a manager at, any convenience store, movie theater, whatever. Just get a trial run level 2 EV charger installed, and this will be our test site. So we want to be able to have, access to it whenever we want. We want to be able to have control over, getting in quickly to the electrical room if need be. And that's why having it, at your place, or maybe your friend's place, or your parents' place, or your brother's place, somewhere that you can just stop by anytime and just go check it out, because we're going to be watching it from the software on the back end, and we're going to be going and physically using it ourselves as well. Let me just get a drink of water here. The test site. And the test site is super important because when you do have your software set up, so I always like to use ChargeLab because they're what I've used in the past, and I just have a good relationship with them. They just make it easy. You want to make things easy, and ChargeLab just makes things super simple. All you got to do with level 2 charging is pay $25 a month. With DC fast charging, it's $50 a month per charger, and you have access to their entire software. So how it works is you pull up the software on your computer, on your laptop, on your desktop, whatever, and you're able to control the entire back end of the app that people will be using on their phone when they're charging. So there's all these different settings, right? And you can change things and move things around. It's not super customizable because it's not your app, but it really does everything that you need it to do. And you can set things like idle fees. So let's say someone leaves their car there for half an hour past the time that they've been charging. You can set the amount that you want to bill them, or as a penalty for how long that they've left their car there. Let's say, an extra 50 cents a minute or whatever you feel need be. You can set those, right? Now, I don't like idle fees. You don't want people to have a bad experience, but you can set the idle fee. But then how do you know it works? Well, you want to be able to go to your test site and test it out and make sure that, all the settings that you updated and put in place are actually working. So that's why a test site is a pretty big first step. You don't want to use your first real location as your test site, because I promise you there's going to be things that go wrong and that you're going to want to have to change and switch up and make sure are working. And if that's done with real customers, it'll hurt their experience and that'll hurt your reputation. So having a test site is usually a good first step. Okay, so with that is, before we even get to a test site, let's say, we're still playing around with the idea. We haven't fully decided that this is something that we want to do. We're just collecting information. How much is this going to cost us to get started? And what do we really have to do to get started? Let me just double check if there's any more to that question. Yeah, the startup costs. Okay. So why I also say starting with level 2 is a good way to go is because the startup costs are pretty low. Like, really, you're paying for two things. Well, three things. The first thing is what everybody thinks of. It's the charger, right? But before we get the actual charger, we want to make sure that we have something connected to it to operate it, which is the software. So it's the hardware and the software. And often you can get those from the same place. Again, I'm a big fan of ChargeLab. You can just be like, hey, ChargeLab, I want to start up a new account with you, $25 a month, one charger, sell me the charger as well. So let's say the charger is, their cheapest charger, I think, is $1,000 American, and it has everything that you need to do. They have chargers that can go up to like $3,000, $4,000, but at first you're not going to need that. Just get a charger going that has what it needs. It's open. It's not a closed network. It's open. So let's say you're not happy with ChargeLab software, then you can switch. You can switch to a different open software provider. You don't want to go with a company like ChargePoint or Flow if you're an entrepreneur, because if it doesn't work out, then you're stuck. You're stuck with them. You can't switch out to another software provider. So make sure that the charger is OCPP compliant, and what that means is Open Charge Point Protocol. And so you get your charger, you get your software. It'll cost you $1,000 American upfront, and then $25 a month just to get started. And that's for your test site. You'll also have to pay for the install. And if it's at your own place or wherever you're installing it, you want to make sure that the charger is as close to the electrical room as possible. the further away the charger is, the longer that conduit needs to be, and the more power they have to pump through. So the further away the electrical room is, the more expensive the install is gonna be. If you find all the right things, you can get your test site going for $5,000. You know, in some cases, depending on how fair your electrician is, $4,000. I mean, if you budget $7,500 for your first test site install, that's more than enough. And then that's not including any of your personal hours, right? Like your labor hours, because it's not so much about it's not about the money for the investment. It's about the hours that you're going to have to put in learning how to do everything, how to set everything up, how to operate the software, how to, there's all the branding and everything. So, okay, so let's say you have your test site set up. Usually I take breaks when I'm filming and I can drink water, but I'm just talking right through. So you have your test site set up, everything, you're kind of getting comfortable with how everything works. Another thing is you're probably going to want to have an electric car, because if you're going to want to test out your charger, you're going to have to use something to test it on. If you don't have an electric car, you're going to have to borrow one. And I mean, I'm assuming if you're interested in this industry, you probably have an electric car. Not everybody does. A couple of our employees at my old job didn't, and we had to borrow the company Tesla when we had to test it out. So just like little things like that, there's always going to be things that jump out at you. Like with any project, it usually takes twice as long and costs twice as much as you originally anticipated. So just keep that in mind. Things are probably, there's things, it's business, things happen, right? So you got to be flexible. You got to be able to adapt. So let's say you do have your test site up and running. Things are going well. You worked out the bugs. We went through a few different suppliers. We had 2 or 3 locations that we tested out that were like friends and family before we got our first real client. And thank God we had those, because there were things we learned on each one. But I think if you have one test site, and maybe if you know anybody that has an electric car, get them to stop by and test out your charger. Don't say anything. Just like watch how it goes. If they're struggling with the app, or if they can't figure something out with, the charger. Another thing that we weren't expecting to have problems with was the cables. So one thing that I don't think I've mentioned this in any of my videos, but having the retracting cables. So you have the charger, and then you have the cables are long, right? And you can't always trust people to wrap them up and put everything back. And this is your investment, so you want to protect it, right? Like you don't want to have your cables dangling all along the floor and people are driving over it or tripping over it too. You don't want any hazards. So having the retractable cables is definitely one thing that I'd highly recommend. Most EV charging companies sell it, and you can just mount it to the wall. It's just like a bungee cord almost. Like you pull it down. You've all seen it, and it retracts back up. There's a few different types, but you're gonna want to get them. If it's pedestal mounted, it's usually attached, but we don't want pedestal mounted. If you have to have your charger pedestal mounted, the project's gonna be way more expensive than if you were to get them wall mounted. So we want to look for wall mounted opportunities for our chargers. And yeah, just watch your friend use the charger and just ask for as much feedback as you can. I'm bad at this too. I need to ask you guys for more feedback. If you could tell me, what you like, what you don't like, what questions I could answer better, if there's any be nice, please. But if there's any improvements I can make, and do that the same with your customers, because they're going to be able to give you real life feedback, and that feedback is for real customers. So if your customer's struggling with, this is awkward, I can't get this thing down, or I can't put my payment information in, or if there's anything that comes up, ask as many questions as you can, because that's the only thing that's going to help you get better. And once you get your first test site up, it'll probably happen simultaneous with your test site. And these things take time. So when your test site is set up, you're probably going to be going and thinking about the branding. I love the branding side of it. And some of my favorite conversations with my clients that I've spoken with is about the branding and coming up with the logo and the name and the slogan. So I'm a big fan of Canva. You can really do anything on Canva. This is not an ad. I don't have any affiliation with Canva, but if you want to build out a logo or a brand, I would probably recommend starting with Canva. At least that's what I did. You can pay for the Pro. You probably don't need to. I like the Pro because you can remove backgrounds and there's no watermarks and all this kind of stuff. And if you're starting an EV charging business, you probably already have a name. The name's the fun part. You get started, you think, oh, maybe I can call it this. I've come across some really good names. Like some of my subscribers, some of my viewers you guys are super creative. You've really impressed me with some of the ideas that you've come up with. And along with the brand is, I guess you could call it your mission statement, if you would. That's kind of a generic. That kind of sounds like you're working at like Save on Foods. And it's like, this is our mission statement, but maybe not mission statement. Maybe more like what's our brand aligned with. Because eventually there's going to be so many of these EV charging companies popping up. There's already a lot of them. And it's like, okay, well, how do we differentiate ourselves from the next person, our competitor? How are we different? Well, you guys are both EV charging companies, but what do the drivers or the users of these chargers associate your brand with? And, it's not just high quality, low quality. It's like, I remember there was one company I spoke to, and this is like 2 years ago, and their whole thing was parking lots are sketchy. Like at night in the dark, parking lots and parkades are sketchy. They're not the safest feeling place to be in. If you have to go and charge your car and leave your car, especially if you're a woman, like you're likely alone in a parking lot in the middle of nowhere. Like that's even a little nerve-wracking for me. And if you aligned your brand with, look, we're an EV charging company, but our charging stations are the safest out there. They're well lit. We have nice bright LED lights everywhere. There's other people around. There's cameras. We have, let's say, if they're outside, we have awnings to protect from the weather if it's raining or the snow where I'm from. If it's nice bright colors. It's not dark and dingy, but behind some building in some sketchy area. Like I would feel quite comfortable sitting there, and it'd be a more enjoyable experience. And if people have an enjoyable experience, not only will they return, but they'll tell people about it. The word of mouth spreads pretty quickly from good experiences, but apparently it's even more rapid fire if it's a bad experience. So you definitely want to avoid that. If people have a good experience, they're likely to tell other people. And the electric car community they're pretty tight, Everybody's like, hey, you driving EV? Me too. Like, oh, I checked out this EV charging station. It was awesome. It's not just about pricing. People are willing to pay more if if it's perceived at a higher value. If they think that it's worth it, or the experience that they have is that much better, people are willing to pay more money. So if you do invest a little bit more money to have a better experience for your drivers, then they'll be willing to pay more too. And there's little things you can do, like painting, excuse me, like painting the wall or painting the ground, making the signage really clear, having your brand. Painting's actually it's not cheap, but it's not the most expensive thing considering how much traffic you'll bring in. You know, if somebody's driving by and they see like, you always know that it's EV charging spot when it's green. You see the green spots, the green signs and everything. It's like big plugs and stuff everywhere. So you can have really cool branding, and it just really differentiate you from who your competitors are. So that's one thing that I would say think about alongside your not just your logo, is your brand. So what does your company stand for? Is it something that you have a particular customer in mind? And right now the market is still, it's not oversaturated. There's definitely EV charging companies, but it's not like, oh man, how are we gonna get going here? Like there's lots of room. But soon there's going to be more and more people more and more companies that are joining the space, that it will be great to be able to kind of find your own lane within the big sea of fish, right? So it might be something you want to keep in the back of your mind and keep it true to yourself. Like, if you, like for me, I live in an area that rains like crazy. Like it's always raining here. So for us, when we were starting our company, we thought, there's no EV charging companies that have little awnings where you can kind of, you're not just getting soaked in the rain when you're out there charging your car. Like at least that's one thing that you can have going for you. So maybe it's not so much about you or what's authentic to you. Maybe it can also be something that's, authentic to your area that people haven't thought of yet. Like if you're in a really sunny area, those awnings are not that expensive, and having, a shaded area. And that's also somewhere you could place a camera too. Like if you wanted to put a camera in there just to keep an eye on your charger, it gives you one more set of eyes. Instead of just watching it through the back end on the software, you could also see physically, like if someone damages it, or, you could it's just one more way that you can make sure that your chargers are up and running so that your customers have a good experience. Let's see here. What else do we got? If you guys have any questions, feel free to add them to the chat here. Again, my name's Trevor, and I helped launch 2 EV charging startups. I've gone through the whole process. So if you have any questions that come to mind with, starting an EV charging business, I'm happy to help. Feel free to send me an email or drop them in the chat here. So when it comes to your first location, I'm always a big fan of apartment buildings, condos, because condos they're pretty tricky to get into, but once you're in, you capture the market almost. It's hard to get out. And if the building, let's say the building only has 5 EVs at the time, it's all good, because next year it's going to be 7. The year after it's going to be 15, then 20. Like it's just going to grow and grow from there. And also it encourages people to buy an EV. Like if I lived in an apartment building and I saw, they have chargers there, the next time I'm going car shopping, that electric car is definitely an option. So apartment buildings, condo buildings are definitely a good place to target. They're pretty tricky to get into, but once you kind of get the hang of it, then once you get one, it snowballs to more and more. What else was there here on the list? So you don't need to own the land or the property. Okay, let's say let's shift to DC fast charging. So I can't think of any case really where you would want to start your DC fast charging business by buying a property and installing DC fast chargers. Like you're not going to make your money back quick enough to be able to justify that investment right as of right now, and only with DC fast chargers. So what I would recommend doing is essentially finding a location, a busy location. Imagine like a mall. So I'm pretty sure it's I think it's Electrify America has a deal with Walmart, and don't quote me on this. I might be getting the companies mixed up, but I think they pay them. It's like $500 a month to lease the stalls. So like if they have two DC fast chargers there, then I think it's, let's say, $1,000 a month to lease the space. But and then they don't get any of the profit. I shouldn't be throwing out these company names because I need to do my research, but just imagine this is a concept. This is the concept. So you're essentially leasing the space from a popular area for the DC fast chargers, but you're going to have to pay for the DC fast charging setup. So I'd say before you go and start throwing out, lease payments of how much, or offering these companies, a certain amount of money, go and get a quote for how much the project is going to cost you at that location. Just a rough quote. Talk to, a local electrician, somebody close by that knows the area. Ask them, hey, do you have any idea of, how much it would cost to install these DC fast chargers at this location? Run the numbers on some other DC fast chargers in the area. Let's say, some other ones charging this much per kilowatt just down the road. Then you can probably, aim for the same amount or more. And then based on how much profit you think you're going to be making, based on how busy the location is, then you can kind of calculate how much you'd pay per monthly basis for renting that space from these companies. But again, starting with level 2 is probably the way to go, because then you'll kind of get a feel of how it all works. If you're able to set up the payment systems and everything with level 2, you'll have no problem setting them up for level 3. It's the same setup, it's just with a bigger charger. Let's just see if there's been any more questions that have popped up here. So I think I'll just leave it. I'll leave it there for my first live stream. It was a little bit messy. Next time, I think I'll have a little bit more of a framework before I just dive in. Maybe some more questions I want to address. But hey, just like starting an EV charging business, you got to try things out, and some things work, some things you can improve on. And I definitely have room to improve for this. But anyone who's watched, I really appreciate you checking in. And again, feel free to send me emails. I'd love if you were to subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll do my best to keep giving you the information you need, and we'll help you get some EV charging businesses started. All right. Thanks so much for checking in, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.